So I think the next conclusion is, well, what do you do if bottled water isn't going to do it? I'm a huge advocate of filtering your water yourself. Lots of people have little Brita filters, and I think that's a terrific first step. That's the price point where a lot of people can intervene, and I think that makes sense, and that's a great way to start. I don't love using plastic. I think, Brita has done a good job of getting a reasonable plastic to use. If you're not familiar with that, with plastics, you can go to Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's Healthy Child, Healthy Worlds. They
Hmm.
have a whole list of plastic guides and which numbers are more reasonable and recyclable.
Well, most of those
Um,
tend to be number seven polycarbonate um,
uh-huh.
pitchers, and typically those have BPA in them. And
Yeah,
what I always tell somebody is if it says BPA free, I would still avoid it because it usually has BPS in it, which is another bisphenol that they've been finding recently is actually more dangerous than BPA. So I would
which is
steer
just so
clear.
frustrating,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Just
yeah,
after years of telling people avoid BPA, now we're
yeah.
thinking, gosh, I think we've done something worse with
Mm-hmm.
BPS.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I tell people don't use plastics at all. We clearly don't know what we're doing. we just
Right.
we don't have a handle on this issue yet. Heating and cooling them and having them in contact with acidic things like water and
Mm-hmm.
tomatoes causes increased leaching into your food and water. So I understand that it's a convenience and it's a comfort to say like, oh, I can get a Brita filter, but it's really, I want to stay positive here and say, yeah,
Yeah,
great, but you've
yeah.
actually got to do a little bit more. So if that's what you can afford, I would say filter it and then get it out of the plastic pitcher, put it into a glass one as quickly as you can. Something like Brita is just a gravity based charcoal filter, which is absolutely better than nothing, but certainly not adequate enough. The gold standard for really clean water is reverse osmosis because it pushes water against its gradient through a series of membranes, and it can remove a huge amount of bacteria and neurotoxins and carcinogens that most other filtration methods cannot. Also, compared to something like steam distillation or vapor distillation, which is also an excellent clean water at the end, reverse osmosis doesn't waste as much water as something like distillation does. And that's really important because we've got to be thinking about conservation. That's our responsibility at the same time. So reverse osmosis is a greener choice. And then getting it from a company that really understands what to do, how to make the cleanest water possible. And we'll talk about that in a minute, is really important. There's reverse osmosis and then there's reverse osmosis. But go back
Mm-hmm.
to the slide and understand all of these different ways that, carbon blocks, granulated activated carbon, all these different ways that you could be cleaning your water. And I would argue really need to. Here's Pure 2O. I found them years ago at a medical conference I went to. They were one of the vendors there. And after searching for 3 years, I'd done a green renovation on my own home and put up solar panels and,
Mm-hmm.
got rid of all the VOCs and chemicals and, renewable woods and yada, yada, yada. What I really got stuck at was water. It was incredibly hard to find a good water filtration company. I found that the people I was talking to were mostly plumbers that had a product that they were using, and they were really insufficient. They didn't, when I had conversations with them, I realized they don't fully understand what they're dealing with here. They had more of the Brita mind mentality, like just something's better than nothing. And in some cases, that's not really true. And this is one of those cases. And I met Antonio, who owns Pure 2O, and he is more of a hydrologist, somebody who really specializes in understanding water. And that was important to me because I keep going back to, I don't want to let my freak flag unfurl too much, but water really does have these mystical qualities. And there's a lot of really interesting information about water being alive, structured water, all of
Mm-hmm.
these things about water having motion and behaving in a particular way. And what we do with it in a municipality is wrong from beginning to end, adding all those chemicals and then having it run through these pipes at hard right angles. It sort of betrays the natural properties, what water really wants to do to be water. And Antonio understood that. So I was really excited to meet him. And he's got this beautiful product for reverse osmosis water that I now use in my home and I recommend to my clients. So I like to show this to people. Many people are just really motivated. I want to get going. You can contact me and I can put you in touch with Antonio. You can go to pure20.com and tell him, you learned about him through this webinar. I work really closely with him now. In fact, I've done lots of radio interviews to talk about the importance of water on behalf of Pure 2O. And I feel really confident about his product. He has this beautiful RO system where he uses several stages of carbon filtration in addition to the RO. And then at the end, the really important thing with RO, which I want to make sure you understand, is RO, once you've finished, is super clean water. And that's nice, but it's also somewhat dead. It's inert.
Mm-hmm.
It's so
Right.
clean, it's removed everything. And that's a concern. So if you just drank RO, which you can get by the jug, sometimes at Whole Foods, that's a very acidic, dead water. You absolutely would want to add minerals back to that before you consumed that, because if you keep consuming acidic water that doesn't have all the minerals in it, it can't cross the membrane into your cells and truly hydrate you. And that's what you're really after, is ionic, alive water that has the electrical properties sufficient to allow it to cross through all of these semi-permeable membranes in our body and do
Mm-hmm.
the work it needs to do. And B, if it doesn't have those minerals, it's very acidic, and that's going to cause a compensatory reaction in your body. Your physiology, as we said before, can't tolerate all that acid. It has to get rid of it. So it's causing more of a drain on your emunctories. We talked about before, your air, breathing, urinating, going poop, all that fun stuff. But in the meantime, it has to very immediately buffer that, and it does that by pulling calcium out of your bones. Calcium is a very potent alkalizer. And so your bones store a huge reservoir of that calcium, and it can immediately buffer acidic exposures. And that's what happens when you're drinking something as acidic as plain RO. So be super careful about that. The beauty of Pure 2O is that he ionizes his water not with electricity, which is also, I think, a huge no-no. Adding electricity to water is not a good idea, particularly if you haven't sufficiently filtered it. In this case, he doesn't do that. He adds minerals directly: calcium, magnesium, the whole concert of minerals. He's got a little cartridge in there that does that, and that gets replaced every year. And I think that's brilliant. That's just the best you can come up for. Here's the Pure 2O lab test results. It explains the filtering system, the pH boost, and then this is their own water testing that they do regularly to show the reduction in the different test parameters. And you can see it's excellent. So I'm thrilled with them.